Okay, here we go. Tom Morris, welcome. Let's play a tiny bit of music if I can do this right without disconnecting us or something. And let's see how it goes. So I'll do the shared screen and take a look at my, let's, okay. Uh, Welcome everyone. And you might be able to guess why I picked that, but it has probably the two most beautiful instruments on the planet, timpani and trumpets, and also some people that Tom and I. Thank you, Tom, for joining us today.
My
I,
pleasure.
this is recording guest speaker Tom Morris for our M350, and what we just heard was a little bit of Cleveland Symphonic Winds with Fred Fennell. I was very, very lucky to be one of the trumpet players on that particular recording. I know Tom and I have worked in the same halls and at the same
Mhm.
places. Sometimes I don't think we've played together in the same hall at the same
No.
time, but that's coming.
Yep.
And I always have told people in our class that marketing is about the market. And I've been generally using the Walt Disney Concert Hall in Los Angeles because that's where I live in Southern California. But this you might recognize as Severance Hall, and it's actually marketing about Severance Hall. And I also like to use a version that has nobody on the stage and nobody in the audience because that's what it's all about, is trying to make that happen.
Hmm.
A little bit. Oh, and I think I can make this larger, and then Tom, I'll turn it over to you. But let's see, one more click will do it. There we go. So, Tom, I captured your background from the chapters 1 through 12, titles of the chapters from your book, and a little bit of what I think I called a case study. And I know you've seen this before, this list, and getting ready to do it with Indiana University, my alma mater, who the Jacobs School of Music, which is where I graduated, and the Kelly School of Business, which is where I teach occasionally. I have a new music business major. And one of the things that, Tom, you and I have been talking about is, having read your book, and I've made it one of the textbooks for this class, as well as Jim Collins' Good to Great, and even the sectors version. And I'm going to get with the class and students into AI a little bit. That's not for today, but it's in the background and it is lurking on everything we do and touch. And I just wondered if, one of the things that you and I've touched on, Tom, is the intersection between music and business, and the Jim Collins and your book really seem ideal, in my opinion, to kind of get a sense for how these things might work together. And what my real question to you, Tom, and I'll ask more if you need any other prompting, but I bet you won't need much, is Tom, where should we start for today? What would you like to talk about? And I'll capture some key takeaways for the students as we do. And I think I'll go back to stop sharing, so we're just can
Hmm.
see you and I. So what do you think? Where should we start on this part of the journey?
Well, maybe maybe one of the fundamental questions, um, to ask, since this is a course that focuses on marketing, um, what is the absolute importance on deciding the goal of marketing? What's it for? Um, I mean, you said in your introduction looking at an empty hall that one of the jobs of marketing is to make sure it's not empty. Um, I take a somewhat different view of that. I don't think that's the function of marketing. I think that's the function of the institution.
Ah,
It's it's like a company. Uh, the company's job is to make products that resonate with an audience. Um, it's not the marketing department's sole job to, okay, make sure the stuff sells. Um, and one of the reasons that I wrote this book and sort of reflecting on my career uh, is uh, is I think that the serious music business has, if I can use a really bad turn of phrase, has gotten over commoditized.
hmm.
Um, it's it's thinking of classical music and concerts and classical artists, in fact, any artist, as elements of the product to be sold. Um, and I think the essence of great institutions is far broader and more subtle than that. It's actually the purpose of the institution to create experience which resonate and challenge audiences. I think one of the lines that I've used over and over again in my career, and I've come to believe it firmly, is the job of people like me who were running not-for-profit cultural organizations is to lead taste, not follow taste.
Ah, right. Yep.
Because I have found in my career that uh, audiences are not found, audiences are created.
Ah, right.
Um, um, and they may not know that they need to be created, but one of the tricks is to find ways to pique their curiosity so that they peek inside the tent and try different things. Um, I'll give you an example from my career. Um, I started working for the Boston Symphony in 1969. And in 1969, Tanglewood had been in existence roughly 30 years.
Hmm.
And Tanglewood is, this great summer festival in Western Massachusetts. It's owned and operated by the Boston Symphony, and it has two prime activities. It has the festival concerts by the Boston Symphony, but it also has 150 kids and students. It's a school, summer
Right.
music academy. And that was the original dream of the place when it was founded by Serge Koussevitzky. Anyway, the festival concerts had been going on for 30 years when I got there. And every year, one of the hallmarks of Tanglewood was the annual Beethoven weekend. And it was a term of art,
Yeah.
when is the Beethoven weekend? And what I quickly sort of discovered is the way the organization thought about the Beethoven weekend was not very much. It was merely who can we get to conduct the Beethoven weekend this year and not spend a lot of money. And the result was, um, the best shots of conductors being engaged for Tanglewood were not at the Beethoven weekend because
Right.
Beethoven sells and who cares who conducts.
Right.
And it was sort of in the 1975 or 76 or something. I remember that the Boston Symphony engaged a German conductor named Ferdinand Leitner as
Hmm.
the conductor for the Beethoven weekend. Now, Ferdinand Leitner was a well-known Kapellmeister in Germany. Kapellmeister is kind of a pejorative term for workmanlike conductors.
Okay.
And he certainly, was from the old school and he understood Beethoven. But frankly, he was not a very inspiring conductor. And the weekend was just terrible.
Hmm.
And the audience realized that. And so they started, and it had followed a pattern of increasingly sort of boring conductors, frankly. And so all of a sudden, the Beethoven weekend wasn't selling.
Oh.
Um, because the vitality in that music was not being nurtured.
Hmm.
And audiences are really smart. You
Yeah.
can't fool them. And so what was merely a marketing uh, strategy backfired because we weren't paying attention to the central point, which is the product and
Mm.
what you do and
Right.
how you produce. And that's a lesson that got baked into my brain.
Mm.
Um, so I, uh, when I was, so that's sort of one lesson. The second lesson, which I learned uh, through my career, is what you want to market. And here we get to what's the goal.
Hmm.
Uh, what you want to market when you're running an institution, you're actually not selling the repertoire. You're not selling the artists. In fact, you're not selling the concerts. What
Hmm.
you're doing is you're selling what the institution stands for as a vehicle for engaging audiences. So in
Mm.
many ways, the programming doesn't matter. Um, um, I mean, you have to do it cleverly and you have to do it well and all that. But, the whole notion of, well, what's going to sell is a very elusive and frankly self-defeating concept. If you stop and think about it, data on what sold in the past is actually not a predictor of the future because tastes
Hmm.
change. And
Right.
also
Right.
you can wear it out
Hmm.
as the Beethoven Festival at Tanglewood showed.
Right. Right.
So my whole premise is uh, when you're running these institutions, start with the music.
Mm.
Lead with the music. Um, you should do works by unknown, underrepresented composers, not because they're by underrepresented composers, but because they're interesting works.
Right.
And you shouldn't shy away from that.
Hmm.
Um, and always be creative in how you put concerts together. And you have to, when you put all the pieces of the organization together, the financing and the fundraising and concert production and the marketing and all of that, it's all in service of that central goal of what are you trying to sell.
Hmm.
Uh,
Right.
so I would just make that sort of point, a fundamental point at the beginning. So it's really essential to understand who, what your organization is about. What's the story you're trying to tell? Um, and how I came to become friends with Jim Collins, um, where we ran across each other starting about 1998, I think it was. Um, is probably the foremost business guru in existence today. And if you read his stuff, um, I mean, he goes so far in the commercial world that if your goal is merely to make money, um, that's actually not enough in the long run.
Hmm.
It's got to be a deeper concept. Again, it's the same. What is the message?
Right. Right.
Uh, you know, the Walt Disney Company doesn't sell tickets to Disneyland. That's not their goal. Their goal is to sell happiness.
Right. Exactly.
So, you know, when we talk about marketing and certainly the cultural institutions that I'm familiar with, I always start with that basic premise.
That's so important. The thing I would add to resonate on that a little bit from my experience in the business world and in the software business is and you hit it right on the head, is the goal is the purpose of the institution. And even in a business that's just a business, we're selling software. If our goal is to make money and make revenue and maybe even be successful on the stock market and everybody gets rich because the thing goes IPO and you all get a
Yeah.
payout, that's not a good goal. You routinely fail by having that as a goal. The goal has to be to build a great company, which is also a
Well,
theme of Jim Collins' books.
and not just a great company, but an enduring great company.
Right. Exactly.
It's Collins talks about different kinds of leadership, and uh, his phrase in Good to Great is he has 5 different levels of leadership, which he
Right.
defines. And, a visionary, um, self-absorbed, egomaniacal leader
Right.
of a company
Right.
may produce results in the short run. But when they leave the company, it usually uh, disappears. And a great example is Lee Iacocca, in
Right.
the automobile industry.
Right.
The trick is to build an enduring company that transcends the leader's or the founder's initial vision.
Hmm.
You know, Apple is a pretty good example of it. It has proved not to just be a creature of Steve Jobs.
Right. Yeah, that's really a great example. So, what are some other lessons and key takeaways that you might think of in varying roles that you've had? And you saw the list I put on the title page of like CEO, author, founder. A lot of people in Silicon Valley think that they found a company, they get some funding, and then they name themselves the CEO, and they think I'm a CEO, and I routinely tell them, no, not really. You're the founder. That's a different thing. If somebody
Correct.
hired you just to be the CEO, that's when you know you're a CEO. But
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
what about you, Tom, and some of the differing roles? Can you compare and contrast? And I love the way you tied it back to marketing. Uh, what does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, you know, I think I'll talk about it very personally to start.
Okay.
Um, um, I, uh, One of the things, when I said on marketing, you have to be clear about what's the goal. One of the things about life is that you learn is what, in fact, are you about? What's your goal?
Right.
And it is usual that that will change and develop, and that's okay. It's also usual that you will be wrong. Uh, I'm a classic example of somebody um, who was wrong, um, but had at least understood that I was wrong, and so was able to sort of move on. I thought initially that what I was about, I was going to be a professional percussion player. Um, I had some experiences which proved that that was just not going to happen. I was wrong about that. That's not what I needed. I wanted something that didn't provide.
Hmm.
Then I thought, well, I'll go into the management of these institutions, and which is I did for 35 years, and I was fairly successful at it. But at age 60, I realized that um, I was wrong again. That was not what really drove me. Um, and so I shifted gears again, and I went and was the artistic director of the Ojai Festival. It was my prime job in that last section of my life. And it was there that I realized that I wasn't really interested in executive power or scale
Mm.
or importance or um, what I really was about was I like to make programs with really interesting artists that I wanted to hear with the artists I wanted to hear them with under the conditions that I wanted. It was very personal, very egocentric, to be candid. And I was found myself in a situation in Ojai as the artistic director that I could do that. And now I understood enough how to function with an organization that those goals got translated into the institution's goals in terms of what we were doing artistically.
Hmm.
But ultimately, that's what I like doing. I discovered that that's what I like doing. And I love the notion of working with artists to create events.
Tell us a little
Uh,
bit more about, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
yeah.
about like the, uh, you sort of underwent and led what I think I would call a transformation at Ojai. I
Mhm.
worked at Ojai in the trumpet section
Mhm.
before you got there, and it's
Yeah.
a vastly different place now in terms of what they do and who they're reaching. And what are some of the key elements about that with regards to reaching the market? Because that had a really fixed and routine and
Yeah.
traditional market
Yeah.
when you got there, and it changed and expanded. It seems like it improved. Yeah.
Well, it is different. I mean, basically, I think um, uh, I did three things in Ojai as I look back on it. And I will honestly say that when I started there, I didn't sit down and say, what are the three
Yeah.
things I want to accomplish? I mean,
Right.
it evolved.
Sure.
Um, the first was, I mean, the first is that we changed the basic shape of the festival. When I got there, and for the I started in Ojai in 2004, so it started in 1947. So it'd been around for a while. It was already somewhat venerable, but the
Right.
pattern was there were five concerts. There was a Friday night concert. There was a Saturday morning concert, Saturday night, Sunday morning, Sunday or early evening concert. Five concerts, and it was one weekend, and that's what it was. And when I got there, I had the grid, and I had to fill in the blanks.
Right. Right.
And um, by the time I left, it was 4 days long,
Wow.
Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, which
Yeah.
is not a big
Yeah.
um, addition, but it went from five concerts to 25 or 30
Oh my
concerts.
goodness.
And it became an immersion. Um, and there were concerts from 8 in the morning. We had one concert. We started at 5 a.m., as a matter of fact, in one
Wow.
year, but all the way to midnight. And and the concerts when I got there were all in this outdoor facility called the Libby Bowl. That still was the main venue, but there were concerts in four, five, six other venues all over town. So the basic footprint of how it looked changed radically.
Right.
The second thing that changed very radically was I'm very proud that we made it a destination festival. Um,
Ah, what do you mean by
uh,
that?
that we put it on the radar of all the opinion leaders in the music industry internationally.
Hmm.
Um, even the Ojai Festival that took place earlier in June with Claire Chase as the music director. Um, that festival had a review by the New York Times. It had a review by the Wall Street Journal.
Wow.
It had a review in London's Opera magazine.
Hmm.
You know, and that's just routine. I mean,
Right.
everyone pays attention, and the audience is only about 25% from Ojai.
Right.
It's 75% elsewhere. So it became a thing that was on people's minds and a thing to do. That was a big change.
Hmm. For
Um,
sure.
and and I think the third thing that we did um, is vastly broad. I vastly broadened the array of artists who perform there.
Hmm.
It had been pretty Eurocentric with a sort
Oh,
of concentrated around Stravinsky and Boulez and we did a lot of that. But I really wanted to make sure that it was far broader than that. And certainly in today's culture of creativity, you just have to, a place like that, you have to embrace that. So you end up with people like Claire Chase this
hmm.
year that Ara Gazlimian hired. But in my time, we had Peter Sellers, we had Mark Morris, the
Right.
choreographer,
Right.
just all kinds of things. Eighth Blackbird.
Yeah,
And
incredible.
yeah, it's an amazing uh, list of people. By the time when I got there, there is this very unique structure in Ojai that is not followed anywhere, which is there is an artistic director that's a multi-year appointment. That's what I was.
Right.
And and then each year there's a different what they call music director, which is
Okay.
sort of a chief curator. And the curators, the music directors, by the time I got there, were almost all either um, conductors or composers.
Ah,
Um, um, you know, but I had a percussionist, a theater director, a contemporary music
yeah,
ensemble, a
yeah,
violinist, a
right.
pianist,
So you broadened that also.
and we, we'd one year Vijay Iyer, so we were really into, very contemporary free jazz. Um, so it was wildly varied, and um, up to the point that when I started, Ojai would hire a music director for maybe 2 or 3 years in a row, and then they'd move to somebody else.
Hmm.
I repeated nobody, and in fact, I made it a thing that in my time, people would do it for 1 year, and that was it.
Right, right.
But they could come back later as a guest with somebody else, and that did happen. So it had this churn, and uh, and I think that gave it added vitality and momentum.
So that for sure. And so a couple questions on that. That's really intriguing. And those three things that you did, I like the way you described them. And they were all a form of broadening, it seems like, and both the time frame with the longer weekend and the
And
reach
den
and
and denser, much
yes,
denser.
and much denser. That's really huge. And then the more global reach, if you will, with notice
Yeah,
in London and all that.
yeah.
And then broadening the areas of music to even include pretty forward thinking jazz and everything else. And so the question always is in organizations that I've been in, both software business organizations and music organizations, is how do we do that without losing our existing market? And so in business, sometimes people ask that question like, well, we're as if we're, and they use this word, we're cannibalizing our existing business. And I think it was Jack Welch, I probably should look this up, who said, if you don't eat your own lunch, someone will eat it for you.
Hmm.
So the notion is, and I think Christensen talks about this kind of thing, the innovator's dilemma as
Yeah.
well, but you have to uh, put that at risk. Well, otherwise, you're just continuing to serve a declining, like you said earlier, commoditized approach, a declining and aging even market,
Yeah.
and eventually it just runs out of steam. But there,
But
how did you get over that initial
I'll
hesitation,
go
if there was any?
I'll go right back to how I
Yeah,
started, is you have to understand sort of who you are and what you're selling.
right.
Ojai, uh, we decided that what we were selling is we were selling this immersion festival of um, a music festival in this beautiful place that's fairly remote. It's an hour and a half from any
Mhm.
place. Um, 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 and that what goes on there is music that will be surprising, provocative, disturbing. Um, um, uh, it's really an adventure. And we'd sell that. That's what we're selling at Ojai. You come for that experience, and it doesn't matter who's performing, and it doesn't matter what the programs are, as long as they fit the aesthetic of adventure, surprise. And we gave people license always
Yeah, right.
to it's you're going to hear lots of things in Ojai if you go to the festival that you don't know.
Yeah.
You'll hear some things that you may know, not a lot, but most of the things are things you don't know. And some of them you'll be surprised you'll like.
Hmm.
A lot of them you won't like. Um, and it's okay
Yeah,
not
right.
to like
Bingo.
something.
Yeah.
And because, I believe that you present music in context to other music. That's the great advantage of a festival where you've got a bunch of music packed together in a couple
Yeah.
days, in a remote area where an audience goes there, and you don't go into one concert and leave. If you're going to go
Right.
to the effort, you hear a number of things. And so you engage the audience in discussion about, well, what did you think? And why did you think that? And so if you go to the Ojai Festival, one of the hallmarks is an audience that's wildly curious. They try
Yeah.
everything. Um, and then throughout the whole festival, if you wandering down the street, you'll hear people arguing about what they heard. You'll hear people discussing it, in coffee shops. And so it becomes this huge dialogue um, with the artist, with the audience, with the surroundings. And that is the essence of it. So the fact that every year, you have, I in 2011, Dawn Upshaw, and then the next year, pianist Levo Vianzas, and the next year after that, choreographer Mark Morris, and then pianist Jeremy Denk, and then Steve Schick, the percussion player, and then
Hmm.
Peter Sellers, the theater director, and then Vijayar, and then Patricia Kopachenska and Barbara Hannigan. Just sort of nothing is linear, uh,
Right.
except the fundamental idea of what the festival is.
Right.
That's the
Exactly.
continuity, and is what we that is what the message was. And so, with each festival, we would announce the bare bones of the following festival.
Right.
No programs. We'd say, here's the
Yep.
artists who are going to appear, and here are a couple of highlights. And we would sell over half the tickets every year
Wow.
before we announced programs
Yeah.
because people trusted us.
Yeah. I think that's right. And what you mentioned too about the fact that I forgot exactly how you phrased it, but it's an hour and a half from anywhere.
Yeah,
And it seems remote. I would say it seems remote, but I've been there a couple times in the last 3 years for family events, and I couldn't help getting in my mind. I thought, wow, when I worked here, I've had this feeling of a place that was really remote and even like hard to get to, but it's only like 17 minutes from the 101 freeway, which has got to be one of the most heavily traveled freeways on the way from LA to San
yeah,
Francisco is
that's
where
right.
I go. It's it's just, but on the other hand, I think one of the keys to the success of this transformation might have been that, like you said, people trust you, but also they're sort of stuck with it, right? They come out there, they're not going to listen for a couple of minutes. It's like, this is not Beethoven week. I better come back a different time. They think, well, we
I'm
schlepped
here.
all the way up here. We have the picnic basket. Let's just stay and see how it goes. Maybe, and
Correct,
then,
correct,
and as
correct.
it becomes ideal.
Well, and which is why, you know, I'm a great believer in putting together events in non-standard locations.
Yeah.
In places, some of the most exciting stuff that you can hear takes place not in big cosmopolitan cities, but in very remote, odd places. I mean, stop and think. The Salzburg Festival is a small city in Austria that's not on
Hmm.
not on the you can't fly direct into Salzburg from hardly
Right.
anywhere. I mean,
Right.
the Edinburgh Festival is a fairly remote kind of situation, and things like Ojai, where audiences have to make an effort to get there, um, gives an incentive, I think,
Hmm.
to trying multiple things, and, and that's as against putting on a series of concerts by an orchestra in a community where people come to a concert once a week or once every 2 weeks, and it's very easy in that kind of a situation. First, you lose the context of any musical performance in relation to anything else, really,
Yeah. Yeah.
and which I think is a detriment. Uh, and it's so easy today if you're a subscriber in your hometown, it comes Thursday night for a 7:30 concert, and at 6 o'clock you sort of say, I just don't feel like it. I'd rather let's watch a
Right,
movie tonight at home.
right, right. Yeah,
So alternatives become a much more attractive
yes.
possibility.
That's a
And
really key point. Yeah, yeah.
but that all of this gets to really understanding the basic transaction that you're offering the public.
Exactly.
And in Ojai, we completely understood and honed that message. We knew this was this was an effort um, to come up here, and we knew that as long as we were very honest about, you know, this is what we do up here is provocative. It's meant to engage you. It's meant to excite you. It's meant to enrage you. And believe me, we succeeded in
Sure, sure.
that.
Yeah,
And um, but but uh, it 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 excites audiences. People respond to a provocation. If you just go for balm,
yeah.
um, uh, that's why if you want to have a Beethoven weekend, you better have artists that have something provocative to say about it.
Indeed, indeed. Well, and the provocative is so powerful. And again, a theme from the software and business world of another book, the Challenger sale, is all it, and it talks about 5 different types of approaches that people use in sales, not so much marketing, but really in sales. And kind of the lone wolf who can do it all himself. Sometimes those people are capable and pretty highly capable, but they're not really top achievers. The best ones are people who, oddly enough, the Challenger Sale book titles them as the challengers. And what the challengers do is they're provocative. They ask the customer or prospective customers provocative questions instead of trying to kind of jam what we have down their throats. We're asking them questions and provoking. And, sometimes that, well, how are you going to ever succeed in the path that you're on? Don't you have these 3 ginormous problems that maybe somebody like us could solve? But let's try to figure out what the issues are. And to your point about, let's try to figure out what the objective is. What about as you
And
look
and
forward?
and
Go
and
ahead.
and really having understanding, deep understanding of why you exist. Why is
Yeah,
this organization? What are we trying to do?
yeah,
It's like I'll give you another example
please.
from my life. I'm on the board of Interlochen, and Interlochen is this incredible summer camp, all arts summer camp in northern Michigan. It also has and there's 3,000 kids there in the summer, and there's just under 600 kids in a secondary school, boarding school on the campus during the winter. The camp's been going almost 100 years, and
Wow.
boarding school since 1964. It's a venerable organization. And we were, when I got on the board, we were talking about possibility of a major fund drive. And a group of us said, well, why? And they said, well, because it's time for a fund drive and we need the money, we need to add to our endowment. Well, uh, there's one way not to raise, one way that is a bad strategy for raising money, and that is make the pitch because we need it. You
Right,
got to make the pitch for what
right.
are you about and what are you
Yeah.
giving? It's a transaction. And that led to, so what is the purpose of Interlochen?
Ah,
And um, and Interlochen, like a lot of schools, basically when they talked about themselves, they talked about famous people who went there.
ah.
You know, great. Um, and we looked at some numbers. There are 125,000 alums from Interlochen,
Hmm.
most of which are the camp. 125,000. And the number of famous people, let's be generous, is 50, maybe 100,
Yeah, right.
right? Um, So if it's our business to be training high achievers, we're failing.
Hmm.
Um, it's a high school. Are we really training people to be musicians or artists? And we applied some of Colin's principles about
Right.
sort of what is the purpose of interlock. And we came up with the line that Interlock's purpose is to ignite a lifelong passion in the arts.
All right.
Because people who went to Interlochen who are audience members or supporters of the
Hmm.
local theater company are just as valuable alums as somebody who's an actor on stage.
Yeah. And in some ways, more so, more
Yeah.
valuable.
So,
Yeah.
so really understanding purpose and understanding
Yes.
why you exist and what is the fundamental transaction here.
So that is so great because I was going to ask you about what's happening with the schools because I know that's part of your current passion and what
Yeah.
you have looking forward. And also, uh, maybe we could talk about the book a little bit. And I didn't warn, I just thought of this as you're talking. So your book came out recently, 2024,
Yeah.
and I know you spent a lot of time writing it and also as a project to get it published. Now that it's out, you're probably learning all kinds of new things about marketing. And so, could you share some of that?
Yeah, I mean, my very snarky conclusion is that I think I found an industry that maybe has more challenges than the symphony orchestra world, which is the book publishing industry.
Well
Um,
done.
it's difficult. I mean, it's we have to face that culture in the broadest sense, high culture, um, is something that with the change of media, uh, newspapers and everything, um, it's it's very increasingly hard to be heard.
Hmm.
Um, uh, and because it's thought to be a niche kind of situation, and that doesn't sell newspapers, and so it's very hard to find a newspaper in a community today that actually reviews on a regular basis what's going on
Right.
in serious music, for example.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, um, and so the traditional, you have to resort to non-traditional ways, and um, that's probably a good thing to force organization to think more clearly and be more proactive and involved as opposed to, well, we just need a good review. First, that's a bad strategy because you have no control over getting a
Right.
good review.
Right.
um,
Eh,
Spell my name right, and so, and my book is very much of a niche publication. It's also, I've learned, so it's very hard to sort of get the word out.
mhm.
Um, and what you just have to do is pound away. Um, uh, Also, I've realized in this that what this is about for me right now is not the book at all. It's about the ideas of the book is a reflection
Yes.
of, I wrote it because I had something I wanted to say.
Right.
And I tried to articulate those as clearly as I could. Um, and I'm committed to being as engaged as I can be in conversations about those ideas with anybody, you know. Uh, and it's not about selling more books. I never did this to sell books. I did it in order to to say something. Um, what is sort of fascinating is I also, um, what's the way to put this? Uh, I don't I don't like mincing words. Uh, I You have to, there's a degree of politicness you have to always have. Um, but clarity of thinking and articulating ideas is something that I'm just fixated on.
It's so important and lacking in a lot of places around the world, it
Yeah.
seems. But although it might seem lacking, if you look for it, it can be found.
Oh yeah.
And I really like the way you described about, uh, what your objective is in writing and publishing and even marketing the book. And if I'm hearing you right, it's not to make money, it's to make a difference and get the word out and share what you learned. But now you
Right.
got to do some marketing, you got to sell. You don't, and I think I could speak for you or for anyone. We don't want to go broke doing whatever it is we're doing. We don't want
No.
it to be a money loser, but and it seems like you're sort of over the hump, as it looks like to me, on getting the book out there and getting enough people reading it. So I think it's working. And
I want to get people arguing about it. Because one of the things that I have found is that for some sections of the music industry, the book is perceived as way too direct,
oh wow, yeah,
and I mean, boggles the mind. But I mean, I think I say it in the book that uh, uh, I think real thought around real issues, um, and being articulate about what they are and finding ways to
yeah,
deal with them is something that's been in short supply in this field. Um, I tell the story in the book. I found and this is one example, but it's a good one. In 1999, I think it was 98, the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, which had not been giving money to the orchestra world, decided that maybe we should,
hmm.
but let's figure out what we're getting into and where we can make a difference. And so they actually instituted a sort of a process of think tank and listening sessions with lots of people from the field and experts, and to
Mm-hmm.
sort of what are the key issues going on, what's going on out there.
Right,
And they published an internal document sort of summarizing this, which is extremely, I thought, well done and again, very direct. And it lays out, what they're finding are challenges, too many boring concerts, sort of negative culture, uh, uh, underfinanced,
yeah,
audiences
mm-hmm.
not growing, blah, blah, long list of things. 1998, and the Mellon Foundation then succeeded in the next 10 years of investing $125 million in orchestras,
Wow, wow.
through a program that they put together. And here we are in the early 2020s, and every single one of those problems exists today. Um, 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 and it's, and what went on was that it got too sort of process,
Hmm.
with convenings and meetings and conferences and uh, and my experience is that's not the way progress is made.
Right,
Orchestras are local businesses,
yeah,
and orchestras have to solve their own problems. They might learn something from others, but to think that there can be some group solution is erroneous. And um, so I sort of, as I sort of articulate what I see today are the critical challenges, most of which have to do with the artistic product, which is kind of stale, which, by definition, will not excite audiences. I
right.
mean, nothing, the worst thing you can possibly do is, not a bad concert, but a merely ordinary concert.
Right. That's so good. So look,
Yeah,
I know I'm starting to use up more of your time than I promised, and this is
yeah,
so super valuable. I really, really appreciate
great.
your time. I've got a
My
few
pleasure.
of the key takeaways that I wrote down, and I won't rattle all of them off to you, but I will type them out and put them in the
Okay,
document. I'll send you a copy of them. And
good.
just the kind of finishing on one thought is the directness thing. And And earlier in some of the topics you talked about how the audiences, the Ojai audiences, trusted y'all, and that's such an important thing. And then also you mentioned something about being honest with audience members and patrons and such. And then this directness thing, which is a form of honesty. And the two things I wanted to share are, one is I learned to be honest and direct from my teacher in Cleveland, Bernie Edelstein, principal trumpet in the Cleveland Orchestra. And I know he was there when you were there.
Yep.
And not only was he a great trumpet player, which is sort of table stakes, and actually he was the best at this of the four big orchestras. When those guys retired, the orchestras called Bernie to ask him if he wanted that job when Bill
Sure.
Vacchiano retired.
I know. Sure.
However,
Mm.
you also have to be able to speak truth to power and do things like this. And I watched him because I was lucky to work with him when they'd stop in a rehearsal and he would speak to that moments, but he would say, gee whiz, maestro. That's how you know it's coming. This sort of conflation of a little bit of humility and respect, but also, and he'd be looking over the glasses, and then he would, yeah. And I had a couple opportunities to use this in a business setting. And I said something to my German CEO when I worked for the big German company, the SAP. And after the meeting, Tom, I thought, where did I come up with that? Oh, I know. That's pure Bernie. That's where I got it. So thank you again. And the last thing I wanted to share with you is that, and I'm not going to mention his name because I didn't check with him first, but one of the colleagues that you and I have in common, I was asking him about Tom Morris, and here's what he told me. I worked really closely with him. We negotiated on contracts and stuff. He never once lied to me. And I think in the world we live in today, bless you, Tom. Thanks for doing this.
My pleasure. And I know who that was.
I know you do.
Thanks
Talk to you
very
soon.
much. Okay.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.